Hey guys, long time no see. My last video I had some feedback and some comments on something that I said. And I kind of said it jokingly, but apparently poorly said it jokingly. But I made a statement that women are smarter than men and men are stronger than women. And I said it as if it was facts, but I was kind of laughing to myself. But I did get a lot of feedback, and I just wanted to kind of research it more and educate myself, educate you guys, and find a conclusion. I do have flashcards because that's just who I am. I'm sorry, I can't remember everything off the top of my head, so I'm just gonna read off my cards and when I need to. But yeah, so here's some things that I found. First off, I wanted to look up the actual definition of intelligence, and when I just Googled it. I just Googled the definition of intelligence, and what came up was the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, which is kind of vague. I feel like that's not really that much information. And then I wanted to dive more into my research. I mostly looked through YouTube, but I read some articles. There's really not that much great information on it that I was able to dig up, but the first person I looked to is one of my new favorite people, Jordan Peterson, who I've been watching nonstop for maybe a month and a half now, just everything I can get, because I honestly just love the topic of psychology. I did go to college for it for a while, but decided that wasn't for me after working in a mental hospital. It's just too sad, honestly, but the actual topic is very interesting to me. And the video that I watched, which I'm going to link all the videos I reference, and some of which I might not actively reference in the description down below, but the video I watched with Jordan Peterson was titled Controversial Facts About IQ. And the gist of it was that intelligence as a whole just needs a more solid definition, even though intelligence is kind of the most well-defined psychological construct. It's more defined than anything in psychology, and it also happens to be what most psychology is based off of. So Jordan did mention that if you don't believe in IQ, then you should just throw out all of psychology, because it's all based off of that. It all reverts back to intelligence and so forth. And then I kind of wanted to dig a little bit more into, well, what is intelligence? What research has been done? And I did find that I found a video by Psych2Go titled The 9 Types of Intelligence. And it was about a concept, it's called the theory of multiple intelligence, thought up by an American psychologist named Howard Gardner. And he came up with 9 classifications of intelligence, stating that just one test is not enough to classify someone's intelligence, because intelligence is so vast. And here are a couple. Well, here's all 9, and I'll give you a slight gist of it. I'll also here's a picture, kind of listing what those intelligences are, and I'll try to keep that up while I'm listing them. The first is natural intelligence, which is about connecting and understanding nature. People with natural intelligence can see subtle changes in their surroundings. They have good survival skills, things like that. Number 2 would be intrapersonal intelligence, which is the ability to understand your inner self and set goals and achieve goals, and just kind of, it's all internal, which I think is a very common intelligence people have. Well, maybe not. Maybe just the people I know. I don't know. Number 3 is linguistic intelligence, which is using language through writing and speaking. People with linguistic intelligence often are good at learning other languages, good at public speaking, and communicating with others through speech. Number 4 would be bodily kinesthetic intelligence, which is the intelligence of, coordination between mind and body. Often always very athletic people have this form of intelligence. Number 5 is interpersonal, which is communications with others. So you're very good at communicating with others, you're good at mind reading per se, kind of knowing like how other people are feeling, how they're gonna feel, predicting their emotions towards something that's gonna be said, things like that. It could also be known as emotional intelligence, which Jordan Peterson personally denies. He thinks that is classified not as intelligence, but more towards agreeableness. Not sure I agree, but yeah, I thought I'd mention it because I respect him, so I thought maybe you can look into it yourself if you wanted more information. The next, number 6, is existential intelligence, which is like introspective, deep thinking, contemplation of life and death, things like that. Number 7 would be math and logistical thinking, which is kind of straightforward. It's just intelligence in math and logical thinking. You're good at like hypothesizing, math equations, sciences, things like that, which is probably the most tested form of intelligence. The other ones are kind of, I feel like, neglected a little bit, but anyway, number 8 is musical intelligence, recognizing sound, pitch, rhythm, and timbre. I don't know, I'm not musically intelligent. But these are people who, like Mozart and Beethoven, and very popular people who can have perfect pitch and play a song right when they hear it. That's musical intelligence. And lastly, number 9 is spatial intelligence, which is experiencing the world through 3D. People with spatial intelligence are really good at following a map and navigating, often good with sailing and piloting, things like that. Definitely not my strong point. I have been using my GPS to get to school since I started going to school. I think yesterday was like my first time not using it, and I got lost, so it's pretty bad. But I looked more into the issues with the 9 types of intelligence. And a big issue with these intelligences are that there's too much crossover and correlation between each subject, which has been looked at by another psychologist who he agreed with Howard Gardner's concept of different intelligences, but he narrowed it down into 3 intelligences instead of 9, and he titled them analytical, creative, and practical. And each of those 9 can kind of be subcategorized into those 3. Jordan Peterson, in his video, reverting back to that, mentioned that the issue with multiple intelligences was exactly that there's so much correlation and overlap that it defeats the purpose. So just quoting him, he's saying that if one thing correlates with another, it just makes it one thing. So it's pointless to have another title for it. So it seems like that psychologist agreed with him. That's why he narrowed it down to 3. So I then watched a video titled "Are Boys Smarter Than Girls?" Which is kind of a interesting video. The facts at the beginning were very good. I actually stopped watching it towards the end because it became very like social justice warrior-y and soy boy-y. So I didn't really like the ending, but the statistics at the beginning were very helpful. Some of them covered a lot of what my comments section was saying in my feminist video. So it starts off by saying that male brains are 8 to 13% larger in volume, and this is due to different body sizes, which I agree with, because obviously men are, generally speaking, larger than women on, not like fatter, but like they're just more built. They're just bigger creatures than women. However, the female brain has more folds and therefore more cortical surface areas. So it's really not an argument saying, oh, well, men's brains are bigger, so they must be smarter. And another way to kind of discuss that is that, sperm whales and dolphins and elephants have bigger brains than males, but they're definitely not smarter than men. Humans are just the smartest species we have, at least on some of these topics some of these types of intelligences. But having said that, I'm sure that whales and elephants and dolphins are smarter in some situations, such as survival, but we don't need to get into that. This is just about men and women. Another topic that this video breached was it said that males have more connection within hemispheres of the brain. So if you look at two sides of the brain, they have more connections between each side, but women have more connections between the hemispheres, so they crisscross over. So women's and men's brains, women and men have different brains. They work differently. They we just think of things in different ways, is what I got from that section of that video. There was also a study, research have found from a study of over 14 brains that mostly all men and women have a mosaic of both male and female structures. So for example, they evaluated men and women, typical female and male behaviors such as, girls often want to scrapbook, men often want to play video games, but there was often overlap in between the two. So women also like playing video games, men also like doing artsy things, maybe not scrapbooking, but to each their own. There was just a lot of crossover, so they couldn't definitely put one activity to one gender, which I know I personally can agree with, because I was a tomboy growing up most of my life, but I'm also love makeup, and I'm in school for makeup and all that kind of stuff. So it's just, you are who you are. And then also they had a study showing that women have stronger verbal abilities on average, and men have stronger visual and spatial abilities, which, that's been joked about for years, honestly. But studies have shown that is accurate. And then they went on to show the classic bell curve. Now, the bell curve was mentioned a lot in my comments, which here's a picture of that bell curve, which I might bring up later. As you can see, the blue is male intelligence, the red is female intelligence. The blue shows that there is more outliers on the very end of the spectrum and at the very front of the spectrum, whereas females are more concentrated in the center. So that's just kind of saying that there are more really dumb men and more really smart men than there are women, but on average we are of equal intelligence. Women receive according to this study, women received consistently better grades in 70% of nations in language, math, and science. But in the United States, SAT testing showed that males score 33 points higher than females in both math and science. There were more studies that they went through, and it showed that, in different cultures, these studies varied. So they determined kind of that cultural and environmental differences played a very big role in education and how we do on our testing. They also had another study called the stereotype threat, meaning that if men and women were taking a test and the teacher said to the women, you guys on average don't do as well as men on this, then they wouldn't. They would score lower than their male counterparts. But when taking the same exact test and not being told that, they scored the same as their male counterparts, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wasn't fully sold on it, but it was interesting that it was all kind of based off of what they were being told, which is very common. I have read studies saying that men, when they do something wrong or they're lacking in an ability, they blame it on not trying hard enough. Whereas when women are lacking in ability, they blame it on lack of ability, meaning it's not possible. So the way men set themselves up mentally is that, oh, if I tried harder, I'd be able to do it. Whereas when women are told they can't do it, they just don't think they can do it. I don't remember where I read that study. I'm sorry about that. I wish I could reference that for you down below, but I'll dig for it, see if I can find it. But it was a very interesting study. So after I watched that video, that was not the whole video, I just stopped being interested in what they had to say, honestly. I watched a video which was a TED talk, a TEDx talk, meaning it was just branched off of TED but not sponsored by them, and it was for TEDxUCLWomen, and the name of the video was Debunking the Myth That Intelligence is Gender-Based. And this was by, the man speaking was named Adrian Furnham, and he said a lot of interesting things at the beginning, but halfway through his video he said, that often, and I can probably vouch for this because I have been told this, even jokingly by other women in my life, older women growing up. Women are told, never let a man know how clever you are. And the reason behind that is, it frightens men off. You're less likely to be married if you're smarter than men because it's intimidating, things like that. And then he also stated that men are often told, always show what little ability you have to women. In other words, overemphasize your abilities to women to impress them, which is kind of interesting. I can't vouch for the male side of that, but I have, growing up, met a lot of men, or I should say boys at the time, a lot of boys that showed off things they weren't actually very good at. So in my experience, I've had a lot of girls and boys fit those statements in my life. So I was just thinking of that. Women are kind of told to hide their intelligence, whereas men are told to show it, to show off how smart they are or how talented they are. And women have been kind of bred to be more meek. Not that they've succeeded entirely because of the feminist movement, so this is definitely could vary depending on where you are in the world or country. He also mentioned another study, and he said if you ask people to estimate their intelligence, they'll give you a score. Generally speaking, people kind of know whether they're smart, average, or dull. But there are definitely outliers, and meaning like, someone who thinks they're really smart or really not smart, and vice versa. And studies showed that men were more likely to think they were more smart, whereas women were to think they were more dull. And they called this hubris versus humility. Hubris being male and humility being female. This study was conducted throughout 30 countries, and it all had to do with kind of self-awareness. So they wanted to know how men and women felt about themselves. And it was interesting that most men felt that they were smarter than they were, or most females felt they were not as smart as they were. But generally speaking, people were kind of right on target. Those were just the outliers. So just a quick little study there that I thought was kind of interesting. He was also a little SJWE, so I didn't go too far into what he said, but I did pick up on the things that I did like him saying, some things that made sense to me and I could connect to my own life. Which brings me to kind of the end of my video where I just wanted to state my own opinions. I do agree to some extent with that last study, hubris versus humility, though like I said, it's not the majority. Not all men and all women, not all women thought they were dumb and not all men thought they were smart. Those were just the outliers. So when looking at that bell curve that I showed earlier, I find, in my opinion, I feel like men are at the top of that bell curve. They are found to be the smartest because of that push in society saying, show how smart you are, be smart. Because I believe that if you believe something or you tell yourself something enough, it happens. Like if I told myself, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to lose weight, and I work towards that, I'm going to lose weight. It's going to happen because it's like a mantra, you're living it. I know not a lot of people believe in that, but I just do. Again, this is my opinion section. And I also think that the reason men are overrepresented at the end is because of our schooling system. So I didn't mention this in any studies that I found, but I do think that the way our schooling system, at least in the United States, I don't know how it is in other countries, but it's definitely catered toward women. Men definitely learn different than women. They're more hands-on. They need to move more. That's why so many men are being, not men, but boys, children are being given Adderall and told they have ADHD because they can't sit still in class. But that's literally just how they learn, and they're not being catered to. And it's honestly a big issue. So they fall behind in school at such a young age, and therefore later in life when they're being tested for their intelligence, they are duller than the less intelligent women, because those women had schooling that catered to them. So I don't think that men are at this end of the spectrum where they're wicked smart. I don't think that they're smarter than women. I think that where the women line ends is because they limited themselves. And that's their fault. It's the women's fault for doing that, and that there's nothing wrong with the men up here. And I think at the end of the bell curve, the dumber girls, they succeeded better because they had better schooling, whereas the dumber boys were kind of left in the dust. So I think that if we were to better our education system and kind of change our thoughts as society of how we push women towards being intelligent and embracing intelligence, that bell curve would go in a little. Not to say that, the blue line wouldn't still be further on either side or vice versa, but I think that it would change significantly if we changed our thoughts and behaviors on intelligence. So just, I don't know, I just think that men and women complement each other. We're just different. That's it. So in conclusion, men aren't smarter, women aren't smarter, we're just different. So I do hope you guys like this video. I'm sure it's controversial, and so I'm going to get a shit ton of MGTOWs being mad about this video and saying, who invented what? And based off of that argument, I'm just going to say, women have been told not to be active in studies, especially back then when we were inventing light bulbs and things like that. It was not spoken of for women to be in science. It was not common, and I don't think that's a really good argument. I think that women are excelling now because they are, I don't want to say they're allowed to, but it's more accepted that they can do that. So based off my last video, if you've watched it, no, I'm not a feminist anymore, but I did believe that feminism was important back then in like the 1940s and 20s. So I still stand by those values. But anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that like button down below. If you want to see more of my content, hit that subscribe button. My next video is actually going to be not political, though I am looking into doing some men's rights videos. There will be some episodes on it just to kind of talk about their issues and their struggles, and do more research for myself on it, and then share what I learned with you guys, which kind of what I did today. But this weekend I am going to a kink event just called the Fetish Flea Fair. It's a really big event in the New England area where I live right now. And I'm taking so many classes that I'm so excited for. So I'm going to do some videos on the classes I take to kind of educate my fellow kinksters that are subscribed to me. But yeah, you guys have a good day. Bye!